Absolutely. So now for something completely different after that morning of athletic training talks, I'm very pleased to introduce Nicholas Harvey. Nicholas is an integrated studies student taking courses in anthropology, sociology, history, and other fields too, to create a program of study focused on understanding the culture of the American South. And I have every expectation that he'll actually be continuing this work in the fall in a graduate program. We're waiting for those admissions to come in, but I'm fingers crossed for that. So Nicholas's presentation today will discuss an ethnographic project that they conducted as part of the cultural anthropology class last spring, investigating the culture of some religious groups right here on campus. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to Nicholas.
So, to begin, do I use the clicker?
It's not connected to your
Oh.
laptop.
Okay.
Okay.
So the organizations that I studied were Agape Campus Ministries, a non-denominational student ministry, Banner Church, a Southern Baptist church, Elevate Ministries, a non-denominational African American ministry, and Sound from Heaven Campus Ministries, a Pentecostal campus ministry. They were all the organizations on campus that I could find that were available and on the surface seemed to be non-denominational or evangelical orientation. In terms of the methodology, I followed the standard practices of ethnography. Observation, I was there in person watching the programs, watching the interactions, formal and informal. I interviewed a number of people at all four, asking them a wide variety of questions regarding gender, race, politics, theological questions, societal beliefs, how they felt within their own organization and others. And finally, the key factor of the ethnographic principle of participant observation, being a participant. I partook in prayer, I sat during musical performances, I clapped, because within ethnography it is key to be an active participant and observer rather than a distant one. As such, I felt that I had, per ethnography, I immersed myself in the active physical culture of these groups. So my primary question, starting, was what's causing all these non-denominational groups to form, and in what ways are they similar and different from each other? And what they came away from was that each organization felt a need to form based on perception. These perceptions sprang from a lack of perceived religiosity or Christianity at JSU, as well as desire to reform the perception of Christians among colleges. Another key factor is that while I was initially looking for non-denominational and evangelical groups, they did not in fact all turn out that way, and with a few, they did not advertise their denominational identity in their public information, Facebook pages, or websites. So in terms of the demographic data, 3 of the 4 groups, Agape, Banner, and SFH, predominantly, if not overwhelmingly, white in makeup. Every interviewee from these 3 was white, and the leadership positions were as well. Elevate Ministries is explicitly African American in orientation, outlook, and in leadership. They explicitly reference this intersection of identity and religion, and a point was made by more than one person that they believed that this was a intersection almost of a counter-public or defiant state in reference to what they perceived as white Christianity. In terms of the gender demographics, nearly equal percentages of men and women in all of them. SFH had more women than men present. There was women in leadership in all organizations, with women serving in pastoral positions, with the exception being Banner, who has a single male pastor. Southern Protestantism traditionally has not had female leadership, and this is a novel development to have this explicit, recognized, and stated rather than informal positions. And many of these groups did not perceive it as novel. For them, it was in keeping with the traditional outlook. They merely maintained that it was a functional distinction. Music was a key component at these organizations. All of them had music, singing and praise were key, and in the case of Elevate, it was functionally a concert. There was spoken word, there was singing, live music, they had a band present, and the entire event felt like an inherently musical form of worship. There was never a quiet moment at Elevate. Now, the traditional emphasis on music as a form of praise is very much in keeping with Christian, Protestant, and evangelical tradition, especially in the South. And this shows that this remains true in this current generation and points to the universal nature of music as a form of appeal and worship within this religious tradition. Aesthetic and image were key factors as well, as noted earlier. All four groups were composed of individuals in casual wear, and they were, speaking modern, contemporary, Generation Z and millennial lingo. Banner and Elevate play contemporary music, with Banner even having completely secular music at points, not religious at all. At having a open trivia night that was not itself explicitly religious either. Banner and Agape both professed this need of image reform to change the aesthetic and popular appearance of Christians. In the case of Banner, specifically Southern Baptists, they do identify explicitly as Baptist, but this is obfuscated in much of their material, claiming that the terminology of Baptist, of Southern Baptist, has certain connotations that they wish to move away from. Belief. Outside of the gender equity and leadership, there's functionally no theological change, even accounting for the difference in generations. Symbolic communion, as opposed to the Catholic belief in transubstantiation, adult-only or adult-preferred baptism, the literal belief of the resurrection, traditional beliefs on marriage, homosexuality, the belief in the rapture, and open, continued evangelization. All of these were pretty much universally held. The key factor outside of the change in women's leadership was this targeting of aesthetic, that they were perceived negatively due to their traditional beliefs, and that they need to be nicer, as one person specifically told me. They need to have people think that they are nice regardless of belief differences. Now, one thing that I did continually note, despite all these groups professing distinct identities, is that almost uniformly, all of their belief systems were identical. There was no clear dividing factor that would clearly delineate one denominational or non-denominational party from one another. So why are they different? Why are they different organizations at all? And a key factor in this perspective of belief and perception is this idea of persecution. They feel that the changes in societal beliefs, that cultural shifts, normative ideas moving, is on some level a systemic and cultural persecution. They felt that these changes are attacks on them. They felt this very deeply. And is worth noting, of course, that they are stating this in the context of one of the most Christian and Protestant states in the United States and even within the American South. And this belief crossed gender, race, and lines of leadership and common membership. Now, as far as what can be taken away from this, these ideas of gender, race, and tradition are very much key issues. For example, the fact that there has to exist an explicitly African-American Black ministry, even decades after integration, deals with the issue of why does a universalizing faith have functional religious segregation now? And, as was noted earlier, the only racially conscious organization was Elevate. The ones that were white-led never mentioned race or ethnicity in any context, explicit or implicit. Then, does the acceptance of women in leadership represent a shifting consensus, just a moment in time, or is it a collapse in consensus showcasing an atomization in Christian and Protestant Christian belief? And with this sense of atomization, why is it that all of these groups continuously form? Why do individuals and groups continue to split and divide over increasingly marginal differences in belief when overwhelmingly they were, as stated earlier, almost universally similar in viewpoints? What does this trend for ever smaller units within the same faith tradition mean? Are there any questions? Yes.
So, based on your research and the implications, is there anything that you think that we could do on campus or that you would like to initiate on campus based on what you found?
So I think one thing that did come up is their viewpoint on this kind of religious discrimination was very much sincere. They genuinely believe this, and the fact that it was shared across all of these various lines points to this being a not uncommon belief among this population. And so there's this very careful balance that would have to be maintained when you have intersecting identities that often the viewpoints that reach are in some sense irreconcilable. What I think would be beneficial is perhaps some kind of secular or religious or interfaith dialogue that could exist, some kind of open forum or even an organization that could help create a sense of connection between people of differing backgrounds, rather than, as what has many of these people felt to me, they effectively existing in a subculture on campus while at the same time being the majority culture outside of campus. So that a theoretical forum for dialogue would be my proposal. Yes.
Okay, so you cited the Pew research.
Yes.
Given their findings that for the last 60 years or so, Americans are becoming less and less religious.
Mhm.
People still need community though. Do you think that will take the form of churches bit by bit becoming less religious and then becoming sort of really just a social community in truth, effectively? Or do you think there will be explicitly secular groups that will grow up? Like, what will people go to?
So within the rise of secularism, was worth noting is that trend is markedly lower in the American South. Even with declines now, the South is an outlier. As far as the possibility of secular organizations, I don't think it's impossible, but I think, to pull a somewhat abstract term, I think what religion provides for people is a sense of purpose, a kind of essential idea of meaning that a secular organization does not inherently provide. So I feel that if there was attempts or ideas at trying to promote a sense of community post-religion, you would have to answer what was a very frequent sentiment of people feeling lost and wanting to have a sense of guidance, of identity, of meaning.
Okay. Other questions for our speaker?
And you said that there wasn't a large change over time in like doctrinal beliefs.
Yes, it's
So I think like partnering with that, David, seems to like have a very foothold. Religion seems to have a foothold here in the South.
Right, yeah. You were saying you were the same across the groups, but then I wonder, like, if we are sort of, if their strategy then is to sort of hide those things or kind of cover them up or hide them then effectively, what's the difference, right? I mean, if that's the case, I don't know.
There's the t-shirt you
I think that on some level it may speak to an American or perhaps a Southern American concept of individualism and self-reliance. So there may be some tendency to have some resistance to being part of a larger body.
Yeah, sure.
The Southern Baptist Convention, for example, every church is autonomous even though they're in a unified body.
Okay, let's thank our speaker again.